Did you ever believe that everything could go back to the way it was? I used to think so too. But life, it teaches us to change, even when you don't want to. And now, 20 years later, I'm meeting her again. She is back, all the same, and at the same time completely different. But I'm not the same person I was. In the morning, when I woke up, there was nothing to foretell the storm. It was a normal day, like all the others. I woke up in my small apartment in downtown Los Angeles, where I had lived all these years, working in the advertising industry. However, during all this time, there was not a single moment when I could say that everything was the way I wanted it to be. Somehow, I had come to terms with the fact that most things in life are unpredictable, and even my old dreams could not make me happy anymore. But that morning everything changed. I received a call, not an ordinary call, but one that made my heart beat faster. It was her. Sarah. That name was probably the biggest scar in my life. We were together when we didn't understand what a real relationship was. And back then, when I still believed in fairy tales and naively thought that. She was mine for life. But Sarah wasn't ready for that. She disappeared when everything was at its best and destroyed not only me, but also my faith in people. To me, as she went to him, to my best friend, Tom, it was a real blow that almost broke me. And now, 20 years later, she is trying to break into my life again. I didn't know what to expect. My hands were trembling a bit as I dialed her number. And it seems that time has become something unbearable. Sarah, is it her? How can she come back after all this and just continue like this? How dare she? Hi, John, it's me. Sarah? Her familiar but alien loud name sounded on the phone. She said she was back in town and wanted to meet up. We talked for a long time, but I couldn't decide if I wanted to. Sarah suggested we meet in a few days, and I agreed. Why? I don't know. Maybe I wanted to see if she had changed, or just to get some answers to the questions I had been carrying around all these years. The next day I went to the cafe where we used to meet. Though the place was still the same, and it brought back a storm of memories. As I approached the entrance, I could feel my heart beating faster and faster. I could see her from a distance. She was sitting at the table, just like she was then. Only now I could see how her appearance had changed. Light makeup, expensive clothes, stylish glasses. She looked very confident. I approached her and we exchanged a short greeting. She was just as beautiful, but now her eyes, although cheerful, were no longer the same as before. They looked more like the eyes of a person who had lost something important. Her lips were smiling, but I noticed that they were not as open and warm as before. Sarah began to talk about her life over the past 20 years. It turned out that she had gone through a lot of difficult moments, a divorce, a job loss, and even a period of loneliness. And now she has decided to come back. She came because she wanted to fix something. But this correction was not so obvious to me. I've been thinking about you a lot, John, she said. Her voice was quiet but serious. I couldn't believe it. This was something I couldn't forgive. She had cheated on me with my best friend, and now she just came in like nothing had happened. I felt myself struggling to breathe. All these years I tried not to remember her, not to betray myself. But at that moment, when I was sitting across from her, everything came back. Those painful memories, those disappointments, the moment she left me. But why did I stay? Maybe it was a desire to get answers to questions that remained unanswered. Maybe it's just human nature, the desire to turn back time and find at least some excuses. I didn't know, and it scared me. But I was no longer that naive boy who threw himself into the arms of the past. I had changed. I had changed so much that I couldn't say for sure if we should go back to that relationship. Maybe I was still waiting for an answer, or maybe I just wanted to understand why she came back after all these years. What will happen next? There probably won't be an answer. And this is also one of those difficult situations in life when you just have to accept. She's back, but I'm not the same person I was when she cheated on me. And this can be the beginning of something new. Or it could be the end. What happened then became a part of me. The memories, though painful, haunt me to this day. She didn't just cheat on me with my friend. She left me alone with her thoughts that I couldn't dispel. And now, after 20 years, we are together again in the same cafe in city, in the same reality. And even if my heart doesn't beat like it used to, I still feel her presence at every step. We were sitting in the same cafe where we used to have so many plans and dreams, where I looked forward to seeing her every time. When we met, when we laughed, when I thought everything would be the way I wanted it to be. But time spares no one, and this place now seemed alien to me. The chairs were less comfortable, the tables were cramped, and the smell of coffee was so familiar that it cut my nose. And here she was again in front of me, the same Sarah, but not the same. "How are you?" Her question was simple, but it contained so many unspoken words that I couldn't even answer it right away. How do you answer a person who 20 years ago became a part of your pain and now sits in front of you again as if nothing had happened? I remembered how we laughed together, how we went through our first difficulties together, how we tried to build our little ideals. She was undoubtedly a wonderful woman, the one with whom I dreamed of a future, with whom I planned my whole life. But life had set its priorities, and I couldn't change anything. Now I looked at her and saw a strong woman who had gone through various trials. She had wrinkles, a thin line near her eyes, but it was not a sign of aging. These were traces of her struggle. She wasn't the same frivolous girl I fell in love with 20 years ago. She was different, but I couldn't tell if it was good or bad. Maybe the changes had made her stronger, but was it better for us? You've changed, she said, smiling softly. It was not only a statement of fact, but also a question. I immediately realized that her words were hiding a whole series of questions. Had I changed for the better? Had I become the person she remembered? You too. We all change, but these changes are not always for the better. Sometimes they turn us into completely different people to whom we cannot return. She didn't just change outwardly. I could see her voice had become a little harsh, her eyes hiding fear and hesitation. She was no longer the carefree young woman I had once loved. She had become a woman who had experienced a lot of rejection, loss, disappointment. And I realized that there was a lot of pain behind these changes. But was there a place for me in it? Would I be able to open my heart to her again? Or was her return just a desire to find old allies in the fight against life itself? I remembered how much we loved each other, how it was infinitely important to us then. But we were not prepared for the reality that eventually divided us. And now, as I sat here, looking at her face, I realized that we would never be the same. Life had taken its course, and each of us had already walked our part of it. Do you have any regrets? I couldn't help but ask her a question that hurt, but was important. I wanted to hear her say something that would fill the void left by her departure. I might not be able to return to her, but I had a desire to understand why everything happened the way it did. Sarah looked at me for a long time. Her gaze was soft, but that made it even harder. She realized that this question had no easy answers. You know, John, I think about it sometimes too. She paused as if searching for words, but we can't change the past. We can only understand why we did what we did. Oh, and I'm trying to understand that. She said nothing more, and that was the answer for me. She didn't regret, she just accepted her life as it was. I could not break that. No matter how much I wanted to, it was over. What now? It seems that time is beginning to destroy everything that was important. But maybe these changes are our lessons. Maybe they are necessary for us to become who we are now. Sarah came back, but I wasn't the same person I used to be. And there was nothing wrong with that. It was my new life with new rules. But am I ready to accept her again? Am I ready to believe in a love that was no longer as carefree as it was then? She was the first person to break my heart, and it was for a reason. It was not an accidental mistake, not a momentary weakness. It was a deliberate betrayal that left an imprint on me for the rest of my life. I thought that time would heal these wounds, but I realized some pains remain forever, becoming a part of you. I sat in the cafe next to her and tried to understand how I ended up here. 20 years had passed since she cheated on me with my best friend. Time seemed to have erased all the details of this story, but I still felt her presence in every word, in every gesture. And even though I tried to move on, her image, like a dark cloud blocking the sun, still hung in my mind. I remember the day I found out. All those years we were together, I believed that our relationship was unbreakable, that we could overcome any difficulties. She was my support, I loved her, and we were building our future together. But just when I trusted her the most, just when I thought we had already survived all the trials, she did it. She betrayed me with him, with my friend, with the person I thought was closest to me. I couldn't even believe my eyes when I accidentally saw them together. It was like a blow to the chest. Not just a feeling of pain, it was a shock. How could this be? Why? I had no answer to these questions. I stood there, and all my beliefs, all my ideals, fell apart like a house of cards in an instant. She, my beloved, and he, my best friend, turned out to be just shadows in my life. Left alone, I tried to figure out how to rebuild my life. It was like waking up from a nightmare. All these years I thought I knew her, that she was just like me, loyal, reliable, faithful. But it turned out that even the best moments can be a lie. Betrayal tears you apart from the inside. It's not just emotional pain, it's a hellish wasteland that doesn't give you peace. I went through a divorce, but betrayal is something more. It's a pain that cannot be forgotten. Sometimes I asked myself, how did we get to this point? But the answer was simple. We were not ready for reality. We both, although we loved each other, were not ready for what life could give us. Because despite our love, we were not honest with each other. She decided to cheat on me, and I may not have noticed or did not want to notice the signs that things were not right. And this is where we ended up. My friend, with whom I grew up, with whom I shared all the joys and sorrows of life, became an enemy. And it was not so much because of the betrayal as because of the way he behaved afterwards. He did not apologize, did not try to explain his behavior. He just continued to live as if nothing had happened. It seemed to me that I was the only one who carried this burden. And he, like her, simply remained outside my painful memories. What amazed me even more was how they were able to continue living together as if nothing had happened. They were building their lives, laughing and spending time together, while I was left in the dark, searching for meaning in everything that had happened. Or they had forgotten everything that was important, and I couldn't forget what had happened. 20 years. Time is a strange enemy. It heals wounds, but sometimes it makes them even deeper. The R and I, if I could turn back the clock, would I forgive her? Would I let her back into my life after what happened? Would I be able to forgive him and return to the friendship we had? And is there still a chance to rebuild what we lost? Alone now, as we sat together, I tried to find answers. But it was difficult, very difficult. Because no matter how hard I tried, the betrayal remained in my soul, and I didn't know how to live with it. She came back after 20 years, but I was not the same person I was then. She sat in front of me and I saw her eyes full of doubt. She was trying to understand me, as I was trying to understand her, but it was obvious that we could no longer be the same people we had been before. The pain remained, and the question of how to live on remained open. At all these years I tried to move on without dwelling on the betrayal. I changed my job, found new friends, even moved to another city. I looked for new opportunities, tried to create a new. It remained like a scar that constantly reminds of itself. Now, sitting next to her, I could not believe that all this had happened. But on the other hand, I realized that betrayal leaves a mark, and this trace cannot be washed away. Or we both changed, we both became different people, and maybe we can't go back to the past. But we had to try to understand what was going on in our hearts, and whether we had the strength to move forward, or whether we would remain in the past of consequences and experiencing the same pains that had destroyed us once. Money has always been a topic that has held people captive. And although I always tried to keep it in the background, the real secrets started to surface when money stopped being just a number in an account. If I had only known that all I had to do was look closely at those around me, I might not have ended up in the state I was in now. When she came back, I couldn't understand her motives. And at first, I thought it was just an old connection, that she wanted to reconnect with what we once had. But as I realized, the story was much deeper. She didn't come back just to say hello or to discuss what happened 20 years ago. She had her own plan, and there was no room for me in it. I've always been someone who paid attention to finances, even if it wasn't my priority. My job, asset management and consulting for startups, allowed me to avoid a lot of the smaller issues. But she knew how to get to the weaknesses. The money. As soon as I found out that her return was related to money, I felt this web she was weaving around me, and it also became increasingly clear that she had secrets that concerned my business. She came with some kind of unclear plan. And although I tried to understand what exactly she was interested in, I could not get anything concrete from her words. She talked about hold times and reconciliation, but between the lines I read completely different motives. And it had nothing to do with my feelings or even with what had happened in the past. It was about my wealth, about the opportunities I had, about the secrets she probably knew. I started asking myself questions. Why did she come back now? After all these years of silence? Despite the fact that my life was far from what it used to be, I still had a significant amount of assets. And it was then that I began to realize that this was not just a meeting with the past. It was a return for something much bigger. I felt that this plan was part of something bigger and that even my former friend could be involved. But what was really behind her coming back? She didn't mention money directly, but there was a certain sinister energy in her words. She was trying to find out my plans for the future when she talked about investments and my old businesses, the schemes I had long ago left behind. We talked for a long time, but in the middle of it I could already feel that her interests were not the same as before. She was not the person I remembered. And not just because of time, she was from another world, where money could buy everything, where morality was just another unit of measurement. I had to be careful. Suddenly, she mentioned that she urgently needed money, as if by accident, and that's when I felt the puzzle start to come together. Although her look was friendly, her words were not so innocent, as she didn't ask for money directly. No. But there was a subtle hint. There were a number of questions that boiled down to one thing: will she be part of my plans in the future? And then he appeared. My friend whom I hadn't seen for a long time. I felt that all this was no accident. The same friend who had once betrayed me was now probably part of her plan again. This was not just a meeting of strangers. The two of them seemed to have arranged it together. They knew I was targeting certain projects and that I was leaving room for new investments, and now they probably wanted to get their share of that. I became part of their calculations, and was it possible that they were hiding more than I thought? And was she just a pawn in their game? I could no longer just sit and wait. I had to find out the truth. I heard their laughter coming from the other room and thought again it was a game with money and my trust. She came back, and now I realized that this time was not about rebuilding a relationship. Oh, it was about something much bigger, about money, power, and secrets that I now had to reveal. Each of us, in the end, faces a choice, and I was facing it too. Will I play their game again, or will I take control and reveal all the cards? Does it make sense to go back? Or is it better to start a new path without them? I knew only one thing: I would not let money and secrets stand in my way anymore. They both thought I would remain passive, but this time I was ready to fight. There was no longer any room for those old illusions that I was still someone who would let them manipulate my life. All these years I had tried to keep my distance from greedy people, but today was different. Now I was ready to take responsibility for my life and what it should look like in the future. That evening was the moment when everything changed. Moments that had seemed insignificant before suddenly took on a special meaning. The shadows of betrayal and secret deals were getting closer, and now I had a choice. And this choice could change absolutely everything. Sitting in my dark office, I reflected on everything that had happened since her return. If someone had told me a few months ago that it would all lead to this turn, I would have laughed and said it was unrealistic. But here I am, and her words, which before seemed like just empty promises, have now gained weight. You still have something that can change your path. We can get back what was lost. These words have been running through my head over and over again. And although at first glance they sounded like a simple manipulation, I felt that they were not just empty words. She was trying to sell me her version of how things could be. But what if this was not just an attempt to exploit my weaknesses, but a real chance? My thoughts became heavy, as if I was carrying the weight of that choice on my shoulders. I was always the one who calculated every step, who planned ahead, but this time it wasn't so easy. It was a choice between leaving everything as it was or completely changing my life, abandoning my old connections and acquaintances. And the more I thought about it, the harder it became to figure out what exactly I should do. My life has never been easy. Many betrayals, many sacrifices, and now, when I was on the verge of giving up everything, she came back. She had appeared and disappeared from my life before. But now I realized that this meeting was not accidental. I had always wanted to leave all these old relationships and pains in the past. But even when I denied this part of myself, it kept coming back. If only I could forget about it all and move forward. In her eyes, I saw not just a person with whom I had once shared a part of my life. She was part of something bigger, darker, something I had been trying to avoid all these years. And when she began to hint that I had the opportunity to influence even more money and resources, I began to realize that it wasn't just words. actually was offering me a chance to change not only my life, but the entire course of events if I took the plunge. We always try to avoid anything that costs us more than we are willing to give. I know this better than anyone. But when it was not only my money but also my soul at stake, everything changed. I began to feel that my choices would now determine not only my future, but also whether I would have anything left of who I was before. Although as soon as I agreed to go into that dark corridor, I was tearing myself away from everything that had come before. Her words sounded like a spell. We can do this together. You can have everything you've ever dreamed of, but it takes willpower and a willingness to take risks. And although I realized that it was a kind of deception, it was impossible to leave it unanswered. It seemed as if my whole mind was telling me to give up, but my heart felt this was my last chance. I began to realize that any decision I made now would change everything. If I ignored her, it would mean that I was giving up what she had to offer me. If I accepted her terms, then everything I had been before could go away, and I would no longer be the same person I was before. With every word she said, I realized that she felt she had won. She was sure that I would agree. But every step brought me closer to the line where I had to either become a new person or lose myself. Just a few more seconds and that was it. Everything I had done so far could be in vain. Everything I had learned and everything I had done could be destroyed by one decision. Finally, I made a choice. I didn't know if it was the right one, but it was all beyond reason. I was overcome with a wave of determination. Maybe it was a mistake, but I couldn't stand still any longer. I had to move forward. My choice was one of those moments that change everything. But in the end, do we really have to choose between staying in the past or moving forward into the unknown? Is there any room for happiness in this choice? With every step I took, I realized more and more that it was not just a choice between old and new opportunities. It was a choice between who I had become and who I once was. And this choice changed everything. I never thought I would have to face the past again. And even when I had already lost hope, even when it seemed that all that was left were the ruins of my old life, it came back. It was the moment when the past I had been trying to escape from stood before me again, like a monster that had long been hiding in the dark. She was standing there in the doorway, as if nothing had changed. At the same figure, but there was a new gleam in her eyes, not like before. There was always a mystery in their eyes that I could never solve, even after everything that happened. She looked at me, and there was no pity in her eyes. The only cold confidence, as if she had gotten what she wanted. All the memories I had been trying to forget for a long time started playing in my head. Her laugh, her words, which I remembered forever. We were together, but we were never really for each other. She was the one who changed the rules, who knew how to manipulate people, and I became a part of her, who all these years of looking for stability and peace of mind now fell to pieces when I saw her again. If only I hadn't come to this meeting then. But it was too late. Everything was changing. Once again, I was faced with a choosing to stay in the world I had already tried to build, or to return to what had once been. She invited me for coffee, in the same way she used to order everything, stubborn and insistent. I couldn't refuse. She knew I would come. If she hadn't been so stubborn, I might not have agreed. But all these years have taught me one thing: sometimes you need to go back to understand where you stand now. The coffee was cold and bitter, like our conversation, and we sat next to each other and remained silent. Only the look on her face showed that there was still something between us, though it was hard to tell if it was a look from the past or one that belonged to the present. She was different, and I had become a different person. But deep down, I felt that neither she nor I could reject what had happened. "You've changed," she said quietly, but I felt her words cut into my heart. If I had responded the way I thought I would have said, "So have you." But I just didn't say anything. Instead, I searched her eyes again for something familiar, but there was only a reflection of someone else's world. Not everything in life can be reclaimed. She continued, her voice carrying the same melancholy I remembered. "But I think you can still change your path. I always knew you would. You were never ordinary." Those words again raised many questions in me that I had no answers to. What was she trying to say? Why did she come back? I couldn't understand her motivation, and it annoyed me more than I was willing to admit. She was a part of my life that I had already come to terms with, a part that I was trying to forget. From time to time, I felt that she knew more than I could have ever imagined. If I hadn't learned the truth about her betrayal, if I hadn't let her into my heart, I might not be so broken now. But every step, every turn of this story gave me new reasons to think. All these years I tried to forget what happened, trying to live without her. And now she's back again, like an ominous memory that won't leave you alone. I always thought that you were just blindly going forward, but you could never see what was under the surface. It was the same manipulation she had always had. But now I didn't feel so vulnerable. I started to notice something more in her eyes. It was not just a meeting with the past. She was intent on using me, just like before. One look at her was enough for me to realize that she hadn't changed. It was the same game, and this time I was no longer so naive. Our relationship had always been like this, trying to find happiness, not realizing that what we were looking for had long since disappeared. Perhaps I was to blame for trying to live in illusions. Perhaps it was my mistake that I still returned to what had always been a dark part of my soul. But what do you do when your past comes back to haunt you? I no longer looked for answers in her eyes. Instead, I felt a coldness in my heart. And she was a part of me, and I could never change that. But did that mean I had to go back to that old world? Life is a series of moments when we stand at a crossroads and have to choose. And every choice leaves a mark, often much deeper than we can imagine. When she returned, I felt the past opening up in front of me, like a door that had long been locked. And now the question was, should I let this return affect my future, or should I let go and move on? We were sitting in the same coffee shop where we had once decided the fate of our relationship, and the same smell of coffee, the same conversations, only time had passed and we were no longer the same people who laughed at problems. Everything had changed. And now I had to decide whether to get back into that whirlpool of emotions or leave her behind. "You haven't changed," she said, looking down at me. Her voice was cold, even with a hint of disappointment. Perhaps she expected me to be different, ready to return to that old game where we fought for happiness together. But I wasn't ready. I could feel how deeply she had left her mark on my soul, but was it enough to put everything back on track? My thoughts were interrupted by her words. She was sitting in front of me, and I suddenly realized that everything that had happened when we broke up was just the beginning. Coming back after 20 years was not a gift of fate. It was an attempt to conquer something that had long been forgotten and buried. She didn't apologize, didn't try to explain. She was just there, right next to him again, as if nothing had happened. "Don't you realize that everything has changed?" I asked her, feeling my heart start to beat faster. I didn't know why, but her presence made me aggressive. The despair I had once felt returned, and with it came fear. Fear that I would again become weak before her manipulations. Why did you come back? The question finally came out. It was so obvious that I didn't feel myself saying it out loud. She looked at me, and I saw in her eyes not just an answer, but the whole plan she had probably been preparing for all these years. It was not love. It was a strategic move. I was just a piece on the chessboard, and she was trying to get me back on her side. I tried to imagine what would happen if I let her leave a mark on my life again. Would I be able to live through it again? And I realized that this choice had to be final. Returning to my old life, even if it had once brought me happiness, now looked like a trap. I was not ready to give her another chance to destroy everything I had built over the years. But then the same thought flashed again. What if this is a chance for me? What if this very meeting could change my fate, help me reveal what I had been hiding for so long? Perhaps I was afraid of my own choice. Perhaps I was afraid that I would once again fall victim to this game. But I felt that I needed to understand this, and that I had to be ready, even if it meant coming out of this game a winner. I can't turn back the clock, she said with a hint of regret in her voice. But I know you can change things now. I think you're ready to take risks again. Her words cut like a knife blade, and she knew how to touch my greatest fears, how to activate the emotions I had tried to forget. She just understood me too well. And once again I found myself at a crossroads. Should I let her go, get rid of these memories and move forward, or should I become part of this trap I had once fallen into? I looked at her, at this woman who had once been my everything, and felt sadness and determination fighting for a place in my heart. She was a part of me. I couldn't deny it, but I realized that we couldn't be together anymore. The past was behind me, and despite everything that had happened, I didn't want to let it back into my life. I'm leaving it behind, I finally said, and even though it was hard, I felt like it was the right choice. And I didn't know if it would be the last time I would see her, or if it would be the beginning of something new. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going back. And here I am, facing my choice. Should I let go or keep her? And I chose to let go. And although this decision is painful, I feel that it gives me a chance to build a new life, without the heavy chains of the past.